From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Waterboarding itself had to be used 83 times, an indication that Abu Zubaydah had already called his interrogators bluff. In contrast, when we interrogated him using intelligent interrogation methods, within the first hour, we gained important actionable intelligence.
Former FBI agent Ali Soufan testifying behind a wooden screen to hide his identity. We'll play highlights. Then human rights investigator John Sifton on the Bush administration homicides. Then author Michael Pollan defends food.
Food's under attack from two quarters. It's under attack from the food industry, which is taking, perfectly good whole foods and tricking them up into highly processed edible food-like substances, and from nutritional science, which has over the years convinced us that we shouldn't be paying attention to food, that it's really the nutrients that matter.
Michael Pollan on industrialized farming and swine flu, Obama's first 100 days, and Pollan's simple advice: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Wall Street Journal's reporting the Obama administration's considering holding foreign prisoners indefinitely and without trial following the planned closure of the U.S. military jail at Guantanamo. The plan would revive the military commission tribunals that President Obama ended shortly after taking office. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says current proposals include establishing some form of national security court that would authorize the indefinite imprisonment. The Obama administration, meanwhile, has reneged on a pledge to release several dozen photos showing the torture and abuse of prisoners at overseas CIA and military jails. Last month, the Justice Department chose not to challenge an American Civil Liberties Union lawsuit seeking the photos' release. But after indications he was having second thoughts, President Obama confirmed Wednesday he'll block the photos' release.
The publication of these photos would not add any additional benefit to our understanding of what was carried out in the past by a small number of individuals. In fact, the most direct consequence of releasing them, I believe, would be to further inflame anti-American opinion and to put our troops in greater danger. Moreover, I fear that publication of these photos may only have a chilling effect on future investigations of detainee abuse.
Around 43 photos had been set for release. The military is believed to have as many as 2,000 photos depicting prisoner abuse. Amrit Singh, an ACLU lawyer who argued the case, said, quote, "This essentially renders meaningless President Obama's pledge of transparency and accountability that he made in the early days after taking office. The Obama administration's essentially become complicit with the torture that was rampant during the Bush years by being complicit in its cover-up," she said. The Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on the interrogation of foreign prisoners Wednesday, the first such hearing since President Obama released the Bush administration legal memos authorizing torture. Testifying behind a wooden screen to protect his identity, former FBI agent Ali Soufan said the Bush administration's so-called enhanced interrogation techniques were, quote, slow, ineffective, unreliable, and harmful.
From my experience, I strongly believe that it is a mistake to use what has become known as enhanced interrogation techniques, a position shared by professional operatives, including CIA officers who were present at the initial phases of the Abu Zubaydah interrogation. These techniques, from an operational perspective, are slow, ineffective, unreliable, and harmful to our efforts to defeat al-Qaeda.
Also testifying was former State Department counselor and 9/11 Commission head Philip Zelikow. Zelikow said Bush administration officials ordered him to destroy a memo he wrote criticizing the approval of torture. Subcommittee Chair Senator Sheldon Whitehouse criticized the censorship of Zelikow's objections.
We were told that waterboarding was determined to be legal, but we're not told how badly the law was ignored, bastardized, and manipulated by the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel.
Senator Whitehouse went on to call for the establishment of a truth commission to further probe the Bush administration torture programs. We'll have more from the Senate torture memo hearing after headlines. The Pentagon says it's provided Pakistan for the first time with surveillance material gathered by U.S. drones. It's unclear whether the intelligence sharing will continue beyond this one instance. Pakistani officials have recently increased calls for the U.S. to share control of the drones, which have killed hundreds of Pakistanis in a series of bombings. The Obama administration is proposing new regulatory powers over derivatives, the complex financial instruments that played a major role in the nation's economic collapse. Derivatives include credit default swaps, the controversial insurance contracts that led to the government bailout of insurance giant AIG. The White House wants new rules that would have credit default swaps traded on public exchanges and backed by existing capital. On Wednesday, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner said the proposals would bring urgently needed oversight.
Part of our approach will be not just getting the better rules, more sensible rules, more conservative rules across risk-taking across the financial system, but a cleaner, more simple, more consolidated oversight structure so that there's less opportunity for arbitrage. It's less easy for risk to just migrate around and move around the parts of the system where regulation is carefully designed.
The Senate has defeated an amendment that would have capped credit card interest rates at 15%. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders tried to include the measure in a bill imposing new regulation on the credit card industry. Democratic lawmakers have vowed to protect consumers and crack down on the credit card companies' abusive practices. But Sanders' proposal drew just 33 votes, with a bipartisan group of 60 senators voting against. Sanders said, quote, "When banks are charging 30% interest rates, they are not making credit available. They're engaged in loan sharking." Newly released documents show federal officials were aware of the large bonus payments at the insurance giant AIG more than 5 months before they became a major public controversy. The bonus details were provided to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, then headed by Timothy Geithner, before he became President Obama's Treasury Secretary. The nation's new drug czar is calling for an end to the so-called war on drugs. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Gil Kerlikowske said, quote, "People see a war as a war on them. We're not at war with people in this country." A former Seattle police chief, Kerlikowske's emphasized treatment and harm reduction approaches to curbing drug use rather than standard U.S. methods of criminalization. Kerlikowske also says he supports needle exchange programs as part of viewing drugs as an issue of public health. In Israel and the occupied territories, Pope Benedict continued his visit with a trip to Israel's separation wall around the Palestinian town of Bethlehem. The Pope called for the establishment of a Palestinian state and decried the wall as tragic.
And I have seen it joining the camp and overshadowing much of Bethlehem, the wall that intrudes into your territories, separating neighbors and dividing families. Also, walls can easily be built. We all know that they do not last forever. They can be taken down.
The mother of a U.S. service member killed by another soldier in Iraq has said the war zone conditions and a lack of proper mental health services are partly responsible for her son's death. Shauna Maklinski's son, Edward Yates Jr., was one of 5 U.S. service members who died in Monday's shooting by Sergeant John Russell at a U.S. military clinic in Baghdad.
As much as I have a lot of anger towards him, I also have some sympathy because I know he must have been going through a lot as well. That doesn't excuse the fact that he murdered my son, but I believe that if he would have gotten the help that he was there to get, maybe sooner, or got more help, and other people recognized the signs, because there are signs, and you don't have to be a rocket science just to figure those signs out.
Russell's being held on 5 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of aggravated assault. The Pentagon says Russell's gun had been taken away and that he opened fire at the clinic where he'd been urged to receive counseling. In Burma, the military juntas charged the confined pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi for an uninvited visit from a U.S. citizen who swam across a lake to reach her home. The junta says John Yetao spent 2 days in Suu Kyi's home before he was captured as he made his way out. Her attorneys say Yetao ignored Suu Kyi's pleas to leave and spent a night sleeping on a ground floor. Earlier today, Suu Kyi and 2 aides were taken to a prison near the former capital of Rangoon. Suu Kyi has spent 13 of the last 19 years under house arrest. She's being charged with violating the terms of her detention.